All right. Good Tavach. This is 30 letters in 30 days. Again, we did this a year ago. Bizman hazeh, b'yomim mohim, bizman hazeh. And we're doing it again because, Baruch Hashem, the public reaction to this hachana, this preparation for the Rebbe's birthday in Yud Alef Nissan, was received so favorably. And so many requests were made to do it again. So we are doing it again. Today, Shabbos Kodesh, Shabbos Parsha Zacher, was Yud Alef Adar, which makes it a month or 30 days before Yud Alef Nissan. Actually, Adar's a short month, so we'll finish our 30 days actually on the night, not going into Yud Alef Nissan like we did last year, but coming out of Yud Alef Nissan, and we'll share with you whatever plans we have about our siyum that will be forthcoming. I just want to mention some practical stuff before we jump in. There was not time to create a printed booklet. Last year, Baruch Hashem, there was a printed booklet. This year, what we're going to ask you to do is to get the PDFs, which you can download. If you're watching on YouTube right now, there's a link right below the player that says, it's clickable, it says 30 letters, 30days.com. So you can just click on that, and it'll take you to the 30 letters, 30 days site, where that's your one-stop shop for everything related to this program, to this project, including archives of previous classes when we'll start to have previous classes. Tonight's the first class, so there are no previous classes yet, and further information about the project. So this is the PDF, which you can download and you can print. This is literally what I'm using, is the printed out PDF that everyone has access to. And of course, it would be a good time for me to mention Sichos in English are partners in this project who made the English text available to us. And I would also like to mention some more important people who make this possible. I have sort of the disingenuous privilege of sitting here alone in front of the camera, and it makes it appear like Chase Taub is making all of this happen, which is absolutely not at all accurate. This is a group project and really something that I could never pull off without the support that I get. First of all, I just want to acknowledge Rabbi Levi and Baal Shem Tov of West Bloomfield, Michigan, who were the ones who started the project last year and who made sure that resources, whatever was needed, was provided. And again, played that same instrumental role again, and are playing that instrumental role again this year. Also, of course, the Vad Orvachaim Hiskashrus from the Igud Hashluchim. And specifically, I want to mention Rebbe N'she Shem Tov, the director of the women's division of Vad Orvachaim, who oversaw this project last year and is again overseeing this project, as well as Chani Shem Tov, and also my research team. You don't think I'm this smart. I'm not. My research team, Zalig Shem Tov and Mendel Rosenblum, and of course our project coordinator, Levi Katz. And as I mentioned, Sichos in English, although I'll call him up by name because he's a personal friend, Shmuley Avtzon, Rabbi Shmuley Avtzon from Sichos in English. And there are many, many others involved as well. But that will suffice for tonight. Very, very briefly, the importance of studying the Rebbe's Igros is something that cannot be overstated. Meaning to say that as much as we'll explain it, it really probably requires more explanation. The Rebbe's scholarship in his Sichos and his Maimorim is well known. And for whatever reason, it seems that not a lot of people realize that the Igros Kodesh, are a treasure trove of wisdom and insight, and really a way of learning a whole new thought pattern, a way of approaching life. And last year, that was one of the main goals of the project. And again, this is a goal of the project, is just to give people a sampling from Igros so that they will get turned on to this type of limud themselves. And also, we should mention that this limud, this study of Igros, is a fitting gift for Yud Alef Nissan, for the Rebbe's birthday, because the Rebbe specifically requested gifts of Torah, to study Torah. And we are studying the Igros, so this is definitely in that category. There's much more to be said about this. I try to stick to a 30-minute time limit. That was the original concept, 30 letters, 30 days, 30 minutes. So I'm not going to speak more about it tonight, but I encourage you for more background about the Igros, about how the Rebbe personally conceived of the project and pushed the project and guided the project and treated it with the utmost priority and urgency, and what the Rebbe's vision for the project of Igros Kodesh was. That you can find in the first couple of lessons of last year's 30 letters in 30 days. Last year, we were studying from Chelik Yud Alef of Igros. This year, we're studying from Chelik Yud Ches. There are many different ways of approaching the study of the Rebbe's Igros. One way would be to just take various different letters on one theme, regardless of the year, and to study like that. But what we chose to do, and I want to remind you, I mentioned it a year ago, if you don't remember, what we've chosen to do is to take one volume and to go through it chronologically. We're not reading every letter. Obviously, there are far more than 30 letters in the volume, but to go through it chronologically and to give you a sampling, a cross-section, if you will, of one volume of Igros. And the reason for this approach is because when you go through the Igros, from one page to the next, the Rebbe may be speaking to a communal leader on one page, and the very next page, the Rebbe is speaking to a mother about her family, about her children. One page, the Rebbe may be speaking to somebody who's a great scholar and a rabbi, and the next page, it may be someone who's not even religious yet. To men, to women, to old, to young, all levels of observance, all walks of life, all backgrounds, and that's what we wanted to try to represent to you in this 30-day sampling. So what we've done is we're just sort of going through one volume. Well, like I mentioned, it's Chelik Yud Ches, volume 18, which corresponds to the year Tafshin Yud Tes, 5719, and as we go through the letters, you're just going to encounter all types of different situations that run the gamut of human experience, and you'll see how the Rebbe responds to each of these individuals. Without further ado, let's jump into tonight's letter, which is the first letter of this volume of Igros. Baruch Hashem, Erev Rosh Hashanah, Tafshin Yud Tes, Brooklyn, New York. And to whom is it addressed? N'she U'Bnos Chabad, to the chapters of the branches of the Chabad women's movement. Di b'chol asar v'asar, Hashem aleim tichyeno, in all places, wherever they may be, Hashem bless you all. Bracha v'shalom, and as the Rebbe addresses women, bracha v'shalom, as opposed to shalom bracha. And we explained that in last year's classes as well. I think it's interesting. One of the main features that we emphasized last year in the 30 letters in 30 days is how the Rebbe connects to individuals. And this letter is not to individuals, but to a group. It is not a michtav klali proper, where the Rebbe would, at various times of the year, write a letter to all Jews everywhere, all sons and daughters of Israel. But it is a michtav klali in a sense, in that it is addressed to a large group from a very large organization located in many different locales. And So we do not get that glimpse of the personal touch that we do in other letters. Nevertheless, it is the first letter in the volume, and I don't think this was exactly the planning, but here's a little hashgacha pratis. This letter has within it a Baal Shem Tov story, and we're launching the 30 Letters, 30 Days initiative this year on Motzei Shabbos, and of course, as many of you know, it is a time-honored, hallowed tradition to tell a Baal Shem Tov story on Motzei Shabbos. So we have our Baal Shem Tov story on Motzei Shabbos straight from the Rebbe. Okay, so here we go. Oh, and this is in Yiddish. Most letters in Igros are in Hebrew, but some are in Yiddish, and especially when the Rebbe would write to women quite often, that was the language that the Rebbe would use. Okay. And it's a different Yiddish than your Likutei Sichos Yiddish that you're used to. If you're used to Likutei Sichos Yiddish, I think you'll notice that. All right. Ständig auf dem Schwell von dem neuen Jahr, haba aleinu v'al kol Yisrael l'teva v'levracha. Standing on the threshold of a new year, which should be for blessing for all Jews. Wünsch ich euch, I wish for you, Alamin bechlal, und jeder von euch befrat, all of you in general and each of you individually, Ashana Teva Masuka, a good sweet year. I don't want to read too much into this, but I just want to make a comment, and that is, obviously nothing that Rebbe writes is formality. The Rebbe doesn't just write things because it sounds good or that's the way that people say things. So when the Rebbe says, I want to wish you, all of you together, and each of you specifically, a good, sweet year, that has meaning. That has a lot of meaning. If the Rebbe is blessing everyone individually, then why does he have to mention he's blessing them all together? You know, you get the same result, don't you? Why does the Rebbe have to say both? And first the Rebbe says all of you together, and then the Rebbe says, but each of you individually as well. It sounds a little bit redundant or maybe poetic. This is not insignificant. I think it could be argued that this may even be one of the main themes in all of the Rebbe's Torah, a theme that perhaps I will refer to as the paradox encapsulated in V'yakel Pekudei. V'yakel is, and we should mention this year is a year of Hakel, a year of assembly. V'yakel is assembly, and Pekudei is individual accounting. And in many years, those two parshas are read together, and they have opposite meanings. And the Rebbe would often speak about that paradox, not just in years of V'yakel Pekudei, but, and in fact, not just when V'yakel Pekudei were read together. The final Farbrengen that we have until now from the Rebbe before Chov Zayin Oder was a Shabbos V'yakel, and the Rebbe again spoke about the paradox, V'yakel Pekudei. It's a very important idea. The individual and the group and the individual. Each one adds something to the other. And I think it's a very important thing to remember that we look everywhere. We see the world is confused about this, about collectivist societies and individualist societies, and when does the greater good prevail, and when should we honor the individual path of each person. And this paradox is a theme and a motif that runs through all of the Rebbe's Torah. And even here in what seems like a simple way of phrasing a New Year blessing is contained this idea. It's particularly relevant to Rosh Hashanah. Remember, this is a blessing for a good, sweet year that I was writing this letter out of Rosh Hashanah. We know Rosh Hashanah is all about Atim nitzavim hayem kulchem. That's the parsha we read always before Rosh Hashanah. You are standing all together. And the idea of Jewish unity before we head into the new year. Also, the Rebbe says a good, sweet new year. There's a vort, not from Chassidus Chabad, but about speaking about the sweetness. You know, we dip apples in honey. So what's the idea of the honey? I forget what the actual, someone could Google it and find it, but a bee in its lifetime makes a ridiculously small amount of honey. It's tiny. It's a microscopic amount. It's nothing that anybody could enjoy. So when you have a spoonful, even just a spoonful of honey, that actually represents the work of thousands of bees. And if you have a whole jar of honey, then that could even be generations of bees. And the symbolism is that when we're being judged on Rosh Hashanah, we say to Hashem, don't just look at what I'm doing. Look at the whole timeline. Look at the Jewish people on a continuum of history. Look at our holy forebears. Just like the spoonful of honey represents a whole ancestry of bees. At any rate, so the Rebbe gives a blessing for a good, sweet new year to the entire klal, to the group together, as well as to the individuals. Okay. Was in dem is selbstverständlich, Hatzloche in der Arbeit von Ayasnif. Now, obviously, it's self-evident, it goes without saying, self-understood, that in this bracha for a good, sweet year is included success in your chapter of the Chabad Women's Organization. So when the Rebbe is giving brachas to people for a good, sweet year, obviously, he's giving brachas that they should succeed in their public service that they're involved in. In this case, these women are involved in and affiliated with N'she U'Bnos Chabad. Sayin Kamus. Now, this bracha for success for N'she U'Bnos Chabad is Sayin Kamus. The bracha is quantitative, which the Rebbe says, Vergrößerung von der Zoll Chaveros, increasing the number of members. Sayin Eiches is also qualitative, Vertiefung von der Arbeit, to deepen the work. So those are two brachas, two distinct brachas, the kamas and the eiches, the quantity and the quality. That you should get more members to sign up, that's quantity, and you should deepen the work, meaning that the connection to the people should be on a deeper level. It should move them and should change their lives, and all the qualitative aspects of the work. Und in Inyanim von Torah Mitzvahs, von Tov und Kedusha ist doch, wie gut es soll nicht sein, ständig für einen Ort auf zugeben noch und noch. When it comes to things that are good and holy, there's always a place, no matter how good things already are, to add more and more. Things that are good and holy. What's good and holy? Good and holy, we know from Tanya. Actually, it says in chapter 6 of Tanya that what is holy? Holy means bittul to elokus, something that is surrendered to godliness. And godliness is infinite. So if you're dealing with things that are infinite, then no matter how good things are now, you have an infinite room for growth. I think that's also an important point just to make here regarding the Rebbe's approach to encouraging people. The Rebbe is obviously famous for being very demanding and having high expectations. And some people celebrate that, but I'll be honest and I'll tell you, I've heard people, especially Lubavitchers, say sometimes it makes them nervous. Like, will the Rebbe ever be satisfied? The Rebbe said he's never satisfied. Does it mean that I haven't pleased the Rebbe? Which is it's a thought that can obviously can be a difficult thought to harbor. And so here's what I want to try to clarify. Nowhere here does the Rebbe say anything even similar to, well, I'm giving you a bracha that you guys should finally start getting it right. There's no God forbid, there's no implication of that at all. To the contrary, actually, the Rebbe starts with acknowledgement that they're doing good stuff already. But because they're dealing with that which is infinite, so as good as it already is, you can do more. The Rebbe's common phrase that he would invoke when encouraging people who had just succeeded at a project to take on an even greater project, that Rebbe would say, Yelchu mechayel el chayel, which there's two halves of that. One is to go to strength, but also there's coming from strength, going from strength to strength. In other words, implicit there, not even implicit, explicit, is an acknowledgement that what you've done is already strong. And based on that strength, now take that and carry the momentum forward to a greater strength. So I think it's just very important to realize that as much as the Rebbe demands more, it's not a negation of the previous accomplishment. To the contrary, it's an affirmation of the previous accomplishment. And because you've succeeded already, therefore, let's take that to the next level. Okay? Just, I think, an important point in the Rebbe's approach in general to encouraging people. And I see that I'm not in the rhythm of this class, and I don't want any comments. Yes, I know, I'm human. It's 10:22, and I haven't even gotten into the heart of the letter. I know I'm going to go over time. Please, I'm human. Forgive me. I'm going to go late. I got to get into the rhythm, and it's a long letter. I got to get back into the rhythm of these 30-minute sessions, and I promise you, with God's help, before the 30th letter, I'll be back in the 30-minute zone. Okay, let's continue. A little less commentary from me. Also wie der Yesod von der Arbeit ist doch der Inyan von ahavas Yisrael. Wie es wird breit rumgerät in viele Erte beteres Achsidus und befragt in Siches Kedish von Kveit Kedishus Rabbeinu N'she U'Bnos. Since the basis of the work you do, the work that N'she U'Bnos Chabad does, is ahavas Yisrael, which is a theme which is elaborated upon at length in many places in Chassidus and especially from the Rebbe. By the way, okay, I said I'm going to cut down on the commentary, but I just can't let this go by. I think I learned something when I read that paragraph. If you would have stopped me before I learned this letter and said, what is the foundation of the work of N'she U'Bnos Chabad? Okay, I don't know. Maybe it's for women. It probably has something to do with women. Maybe women's mitzvahs. I don't know what I'm not sure. Well, the Rebbe says very clearly here, the foundation of the work of this organization called N'she U'Bnos Chabad is ahavas Yisrael. And after the Rebbe doesn't even say it like, hey, I want to let you in on something. I want you to know this. The Rebbe just says, like, that's a given. Because the foundation of the work of N'she U'Bnos Chabad is ahavas Yisrael, and then the Rebbe goes on to what he's about to say, which we haven't read yet. But after I read it, it was like, of course, the foundation of the work of N'she U'Bnos Chabad is ahavas Yisrael, because the Rebbe said that from day one at the first official Farbrengen, Yud Shvat Toshin Yud Alef, when the Rebbe accepted leadership. The Rebbe spoke about the three loves, right? The mission statement: love of Hashem and love of Torah and love of Jews. So, of course, everything's going to be about the love of Jews. That's the foundation of everything. Also, I should mention Bashgacha Pratis that today was Parshas Tetzaveh, where Moshe Rabbeinu's name is glaringly omitted. It's missing. And as Meforshim explain, one reason at least is because that was the fulfillment of the argument Mecheni no Mesifrecha, when Moshe Rabbeinu told Hashem, don't wipe out the Jewish people. If they go, I go. And even though his Moshe Rabbeinu's argument was effective because the words of a tzaddik have to be fulfilled at least to some extent, so there was one parsha from which his name was omitted, and that is Parshas Tetzaveh. And like the Rebbe explains, that instead of having Moshe's name, we have the essence of Moshe as indicated by Ve'ata and you. Moshe as he transcends even his name. And what is the essence of Moshe? It is Mesiras Nefesh for Jews. How did he get his name omitted? By standing up for Jews who were sinful, and being Mesiras Nefesh for them. And so what's the Ve'ata, and you, the pronoun which transcends names of Moshe Rabbeinu? It is his love, his sacrifice for love of all Jews. And so now after you read it, it's like, oh yeah, that's right. The foundation of the work of N'she U'Bnos Chabad is ahavas Yisrael. Should have known it, didn't know it now. Okay, fine, let's continue. Bring ich da, so since the foundation of your work is ahavas Yisrael, I'm going to bring here An Auszug von a Sicha von Kveit Kedushes Meir V'Chomi Admor. I'm going to bring an excerpt from a Sicha from my father-in-law from the Frierdiker Rebbe. A Sipur. And what excerpt am I going to bring? A story. Everyone likes stories. Welchenes hot seine Zeit der Zelt Kveit Kedushes Admor Tzemach Tzedek. And this story, which is an excerpt from a Farbrengen, it's actually a Yud Tes Kislev Farbrengen from the Frierdiker Rebbe, is as a story that was originally told by the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Rebbe is now going to tell a story that his father-in-law told, which was originally told by the Tzemach Tzedek. Was heint Erev Rosh Hashanah is sein dem Tzemach Tzedek Yom Haledes Chosei Yogan Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, and Erev Rosh Hashanah, which is the date of this letter, is the Tzemach Tzedek's birthday. So here we have, on the Tzemach Tzedek's birthday, a story that the Tzemach Tzedek told, later retold by the Frierdiker Rebbe, and now the Rebbe is sharing with us. Here we go. And like I said, Motzei Shabbos, it's a custom to tell Baal Shem Tov story. So hint, hint, what kind of story this is going to be. Der Zayde der Tzemach Tzedek. This is what the Frierdiker Rebbe is writing. He refers to the Tzemach Tzedek as his Zayde. It's his grandfather. It was actually his great-grandfather. But der Zayde der Tzemach Tzedek hat gehört von sein Zayden Rebbeinu HaGadol, der alte Rebbe. So the Frierdiker Rebbe says that my great-grandfather Tzemach Tzedek heard from his grandfather, the alte Rebbe, was hat das gehört in Mezrich, which he in turn heard when he was in the town of Mezrich, which was where the Maggid held court. The Maggid was the successor and chief disciple of the Baal Shem Tov. A Maisa von Baal Shem Tov, a story about the Baal Shem Tov. Here we go. Der Baal Shem Tov far sein his galus. Before he was revealed, Baal Shem Tov had three phases of his life. 26, 10, 26. There were the first 26 years of his life, Shem Avaya. Then he started to travel with the Tzadikim Nistarim and learning with the Novi Achia Shiloini, who taught him Torah and Seides HaTorah, all of this in a secret fashion. And then after 10 years of that, at the age of 36, he became revealed, and he was a public leader and figure for 26 more years after that. So 62 years in total. So before his being revealed, it was on his birthday, actually, his 36th birthday, before his being revealed on Chayel, his 36th birthday, und euch in the erste Jahren noch seines Galus. And this wasn't just before he was revealed, also even after he became revealed. Fleckter a rumfahren in Yiddische Stadtlach. He used to travel into Jewish villages. Okay, so this is something that Baal Shem Tov did when he was still a Nister, a hidden tzaddik, and something he did also at the beginning years of his public life. So he traveled to Jewish cities. Und fleckt in Mittenmark, he'd go to the middle of the marketplace. I would say, but I'm dating myself, that it's kind of like the mall today. But you see that, I was born in the 70s. Millennials are like, the mall? What's a mall? But yeah, once upon a time, human beings did all sort of congregate in public areas that would center around merchandise. This was before Amazon existed. So, yeah, people would go to public centers of commerce, and that was just sort of a place where you would find people. Anyways, I guess today you'd have to go on YouTube to find people, which is why we're on YouTube and I'm not sitting in the marketplace. But the Baal Shem Tov used to go to the marketplace. And zusammen kleiben herum sich, he would gather around him die Poshete Yidden, the simple Jews, Männer und Frauen und Kinder, men, women, and children. Men, women, and children. Und erzählen sich Sipurim, and he would tell them stories. Die Sipurim seinen gewähn Der Iker von Agodas Razal. Now, most of the stories he told were Agadata. They were actually the stories that you would find in Yankiv, which are the Agadata from Gemara, or stories from Medrashim. In other words, stories from Chazal, from our Chachamim. So he would tell these stories, mostly that's what he would tell. Fleckt meidig sein und erklären sie dem Sipper, and he would sort of go at length explaining the stories. He would give commentary. I'm not claiming my commentary is on that level, but just saying, he would tell stories and give commentary. Oder reflect verbinden a Sipper mit der Inyan der Mond in Agodas Chazal. Or sometimes he would tell his own story, like a contemporary story, and he would connect it with something from the teachings of the sages. And why did he do this? Bichdei as der Inyan soll nikba v'niklat werden by the Herrer. It would help that the concept would be absorbed by the listeners. So, in other words, he wouldn't just teach the teachings of the sages, he would translate it into terms and to stories and sayings that would be relatable for his audience. That's how he taught Torah. Einmal bei Azah zusammenkommen, one time at such a gathering, hat der Baal Shem Tov gerät in dem Inyan von ahavas Yisrael. Baal Shem Tov was speaking about the subject of ahavas Yisrael, loving your fellow Jew. Wie groß es darf sein bei Yidden, and how great, meaning how important ahavas Yisrael has to be by us. Wissendig die Ava von dem Eibishten zu Yidden. And he explained that, how do you know how big our ahavas Yisrael has to be to one another? By how big it is from Hashem to us. Meaning when you reflect upon how much Hashem loves a Jew, then that should be an indication for you as well, that you should also strive to love a Jew. Und hat es erklärt mit a Beispiel, and he explained this with an example. Here's the example. In jener Stadt ist gewesen ein Jid mit dem Namen Rebbe Yankiv. Once upon a time, there was a Jew by the name Rebbe Yankiv. Und ist gewesen Boki in Shas, Gemara Rashi, und Tosfos of Eiswenig. He was expert, Baal Peh, by memorization, the entire Talmud and commentaries of Rashi and Tosfos. Und vielleicht lernen auf Eiswenig, and that is how he would study. He would study without books. He would study by memory. So you can imagine the type of concentration that such study required. Jener Zeiten, the Rebbe remarks parenthetically, and by the way, this is the Friedrich Rebbe's parenthetical remark, because the Rebbe is, remember, quoting the way the Friedrich Rebbe told the story. There are some changes, minor changes, but this is from the original. Jener Zeiten is das nicht gewesen kein Seltenheit in Yiddische Städtloch. In those days, this was not that much of a rarity in Jewish towns. In other words, we would be hard-pressed to think of one person we know who's capable of studying the entire Talmud and Tosfos and Rashi Baal Peh without any books. But in those days, it wasn't that rare. I mean, obviously it was considered advanced, but there were such people. Such people existed. So this Rebbe Yankiv was such a person. Und als man lernt auswendig, muss doch der Gedank sein mehr zugebunden zum dem Lernen. When you learn by heart without a book, you have to focus more on your studies, right? That's obvious. We all understand that. Wie wenn man lernt inwendig, much more than when you study with a book. When you have a book, so you look inside, even if you sort of lose your focus, you you can prompt yourself by looking at the words on the page. So this is the setup for the story. This Rebbe Yankiv was studying in such a manner which obviously required intense focus and concentration. Okay. Amol had Rebbe Yankiv gelernt, wie gesagt eis wenig. So one time Rebbe Yankiv was learning in this manner, like we said, without books, completely by memory. A schweren greisen Tosfos. He was learning a very difficult and big Tosfos. In the original words of the Frierdiker Rebbe, he calls it a beichekin Tosfos, a Tosfos with a beich, with a belly. I don't know, maybe the Rebbe didn't want to use that expression, but it's an expression to describe a big Tosfos, one that is lengthy, and you have to really navigate through each step, and it's multi-layered. So it's not easy to learn, even if you have a book in front of you and you can look at the words. But Yankiv was learning such a Tosfos by heart, by memory. Okay. And so he was learning, such a Tosfos. Ist zugekommen zu ihm as a klein Kind. His little kid came over to him. Und hat gesagt etwas a Chochma, and told him some clever thing. Okay, so Rebbe Yankiv is very deeply focused on his learning, and all of a sudden his little kid comes over and tells him some, I don't want to say cute, but cute. I mean, he was a kid. It wasn't like he said anything as profound as the Tosfos that Rebbe Yankiv was learning. For his age, it was wise, but childlike wisdom. Now, what do you think happened? You think Rebbe Yankiv said, please, Tati's learning right now. Please come back. Oh, I'm trying to focus. I'm learning Tosfos by memory, and you're coming over and you're telling me your cute things. You think that's what Rebbe Yankiv said? Let's find out. Okay. So this little kid came over. And hat ihm gesagt, etwas a Chochma. Yeah, told him something smart. Is Rebbe Yankiv stark nispoil geworden von dem Chochma. Rebbe Yankiv was very impressed. He was very taken by this smart thing that his child said. Now, obviously, the child's not saying anything smarter than Tosfos, but it's his child. Und mafsik gewen dem Lernen, he stopped, he paused his learning. At das kann Poil sein a Kind. This is the effect that a child can have. That's the story that the Baal Shem Tov told. There was a father who was a big scholar, big genius, and he was in the middle of his deep study, and his little kid came over and told him something clever, and the father stopped doing his deep stuff, listened to his kid, and he was impressed. He said, wow, that was good. Wow, that was really profound. Such a smart child you are. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says, hey, after all, that's the effect that a kid can have, right? When your kid comes over to talk to you. I think it's interesting, by the way, since I'm over time already, this is not the nimshal, this is the mashal. Maybe in our time, maybe in our day and age, this should also be the nimshal. You know the difference between a mashal and a nimshal. The mashal is the thing that's easy to understand. To get you to understand the nimshal, which on its own would have been harder to understand. So the fact that a father, even a big genius, would stop doing his genius stuff and listen to his kid, that is easy to understand. And from there, we bring you to the nimshal, which I don't want to give it away, but I'll give it away right now, is how Hashem takes interest in his children, the Jewish people. I'm just making a comment that maybe for us, the mashal itself is a nimshal. The mashal itself is a musar haskell, is a lesson and an instruction. That whatever we're dealing with, no matter how deep, no matter how important, no matter how much focus it requires, that not only should we interrupt for our children, but have the capacity to really hear them and to be impressed by what they're saying, to be moved by what they're saying. But at any rate, that's just totally my commentary here. This story serves purely as an analogy. So let's learn the analog to the analogy. Azay eich, so too, kiviyachol, so to speak, Hashem Yisbarach. Setzt for der Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov explained, is vernommen, is occupied, wie Zal sagen, shalish shoyis rishonis yeshiva isik batoira chulu. The Gemara in Aveda Zora, Daf Gimel Amud Beis, explains what does Hashem do with his day. 12 hours in a day, and it explains in 3-hour segments what he does during those 4 3-hour segments. In the first hours, it says that the Gimel Shoyis Rishonis Yeshiv HaKadosh Baruch Hu v'Isik B'Torah. Hashem sits and learns the Holy Torah. And so morning is Hashem's learning time. And what happens? Aber b'shas Yid davent, a Yid comes and he davens. Right at Hashem's learning time. Yid davens Shachris, right? Prays the morning prayer. Kommt mit der Bakosher zum Eibishtin, the Yid expresses his request. Is it a mafsik? So Hashem, the Holy One, interrupts. Und vernimmt sich mit die Tfilos of a koshes von a Yidden, and he occupies himself with the requests and the prayers of a Jew. Hashem doesn't say, oh, Tati's learning right now, come back to me later. No. Hashem interrupts and he focuses on the requests of his child. Just like Rabbi Yankiv stopped his deep study to connect to his child. And of course, we're learning all of this, like we said, because the Baal Shem Tov was trying to explain how much we need to love each other. So as a basis for that, we need to first understand how much Hashem loves us. When Hashem Yisbarach hat gesagt zu die Malochim, as will beschaffen a Menschen. When Hashem told the angels that he wanted to create man on the 6th day of creation, haben die Malachim gefragt. The angels asked, wie wird euch sein? What's he going to look like? Herrendig dem Entfer haben sie gesagt. So they heard the answer, and they were like, what? Mo enish kisis karenu. What is a person that is worthy of mention? That's a pasuk from Tillim, from Kapitel Ches. And this is a Gemara. This is Agadatov from Sanhedrin, from Daf Lamed Ches Amud Beis, which speaks there about this whole discussion between the angels and Hashem before man was created. So the angel said, in the words of the Tillim, Kapitel Ches, like, this is what a person is? This is what you're getting excited about? You're going to make something like this? What's the big deal about him? Of was darf man as I mentioned? What do you need such a thing for? What do you need such a person? Is as a Yid steht auf in der Früh, when a Jew gets up in the morning. So we're going to explain why Hashem is interested in having this mensch that he created. Here's why he's interested. When a person gets up in the morning, läuft davenin betzibur v'sikin, and he rushes off to pray with a quorum, with a group, early. Und der noch a ganzen Tag is todder umutrod, and then the whole todder umutrod, the whole day he is busy, he's preoccupied, obviously, with his livelihood. Und doch los der über alle Geschäften, but then nevertheless he puts aside all of his business und läuft daven mincha in shul, and he goes to daven mincha in shul. So it's not a big deal to daven mincha in shul if you're in kollel and you're already there, you're learning all day. We're talking about a guy who has a business and he's working all day, and he is, like it says, torah de mutrud. He's completely preoccupied with his business, and yet he stops and he goes and he davens mincha, the afternoon prayer. Und zwischen Mincha und Meirev hört lernen in Yankiv. And then in between Mincha and Meirev, there's a shir the rabbi teaches in Yankiv. He listens because he's not capable maybe of learning on his own. He's not a scholar, but he sits by the shir. Und davent Meirev, and then he davens Meirev. Brengt the heim, this is the most important part. If you remember from our 30 letters, 30 days last year, our first letter about bringing home the Verbrengens. Ja. Brengt the heim the minion von Ein Yankiv und erzählt das über die Bnei Bayis. He comes home and he tells his wife and children a little bit of the Ein Yankiv that he learned in shul. So when a person does this, is den small, then Ruft Hashem Yisborach zu neuf di Malachim. Hashem tells the Malachim, tells the angels, get over here. Everyone gather around. Look at this. Look at this. Und barimt sich mit dem Menschen. He's very proud. Hashem is very proud of this person. Was hat beschaffen that he created. Und sagt sei, and Hashem says to the angels, ihr, Malachim, you guys, angels, hat nit kein Rechayim al Tzavore, kein Yoch. You don't have millstones on your neck. He translates it in Yiddish as a yoke. Those are different things, but they have the same meaning. It means you don't have any obligation to make a living. You angels, you don't know what it's like to have to make money. Kein Freu und Kinder, you don't have wife and children. You don't have these obligations. Keine Tirdois, you don't have any worries. Keine Missim, Varnoines, Steuern, you don't have taxes. You don't have any of these problems. Der Mensch, whereas this person, hat Rechaim al Tzavara, he has millstones on his neck, meaning he has the burden of making a living. Und der Rechaim hob ich es geheißen nehmen auf sich. And so, just so you know, Hashem mentions, I told him. It's not that he went off on his own and thought it would be cool to have to make money. Hashem says, it's my fault. I set it up this way. I told him that he has to go make a living. That's the system that I set up. Al pi Torah, that according to the Torah, darf mefana sein N'she U'Bnos. He has an obligation to sustain his wife and children. He has no choice, and he's not doing it for fun. If you think he's doing this for fun, he's not. He's doing it because this is his obligation, his holy obligation, al pi Torah. Und is torod and mutrod, and he's all preoccupied and busy, and hot missim, varnoinus, he has taxes to pay. Oil hagolas, he has the yoke of the golas of foreign powers over him. Und doch, zet wie führt sich auf. And look how he conducts himself. Look at that. With all of his challenges that he has to deal with on a daily basis. And the guy gets up, he goes and davens. In the middle of the day, goes to Mincha, he sits by a shir, davens Ma'ariv, he comes home, he shares a little Torah with his family. You're not impressed by that? Hashem tells the angels, that's impressive to me. You're telling me a man's not impressive? This is very impressive. And Hashem is proud. Wenn man wird sich reintrachten und vorstellen sich, wie mit jeder guter Sach, was Jid tut, berimt sich der Eibischter, was das Peul sein, wird das Peul seiner Sach. And if you'll think about the fact, how much every little good thing that a Jew does gives Hashem so much pride, that should have a big effect. Or it does have a big effect when you'll actually think about it. So this, the Frierdiker Rebbe is saying, in the name of the Tzemach Tzedek, what he heard from the Alter Rebbe, which he heard in Mezrich, this is what the Baal Shem Tov one day in the marketplace was teaching. He told this story about Reb Yankiv, and he made a point. He said, think about how much Hashem cherishes and values a Jew, a simple Jew, the way that a father cherishes and values his little child. Okay, so this is the Rebbe's Erev Rosh Hashanah message to the N'she U'Bnos Chabad. All right, so that's the excerpt. Now the Rebbe continues. Wie schon einiger Mal erklärt, like it's been explained several times, sein die Rede von Nesiim und Sipurim, was man hört von sie, an Anweisung und Lernung für jederen von die Herr. The stories, the teachings, the stories of our Rebbes that we hear from them are a teaching, are an instruction to guide everyone who hears these stories. Und gleichzeitig euch in Nesinis Kayach. And simultaneously, not only is it a guide, but it's an empowerment. It's a Nesinis Kayach. So when you hear a story from a Rebbe, not only does it tell you what you need to be doing, but it actually infuses you with the power to be able to do it. A Starkung und Bracha. It gives you strength and blessing just by hearing the story. Can you imagine that? Just by us hearing these words, these holy words, we've just been empowered to have greater ahavas Yisrael. As man soll das kennen verwirklichen, that you should be able to carry it out. Obviously, it's not enough to just appreciate it, but you have to carry it out. Und es wendet sich nur in dem Herrer. And now it only depends on the listener, soll das erfüllen Leut der Kavona, that he should carry it out according to the intent. In other words, you were told what you need to do. You were given the power to do it. You're given the power to do it. And now it's just up to you to carry it out. Amazing. Und Hashem Yisborach soll helfen, as wie gesagt, soll man tun in dem, und soll sein mit Hatzlacha in alle Hinsichten. And Hashem should help, that it should be as mentioned, that we should do this, meaning this work of ahavas Yisrael, and it should be successful in all aspects. As the Rebbe explained what that meant to grow the organization, N'she U'Bnos Chabad, quantitatively and qualitatively. B'birkas ksiva v'chsima tova, with a blessing to be written and sealed for good. Zu jedere mit bnei bayis shlita, to all of you and your families. And that is our first letter of our journey. We'll see you tomorrow night.